Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin is an English naturalist developed the theory of evolution by natural selection, which became the foundation of modern evolutionary studies. An affable country gentleman, Darwin at first shocked religious Victorian society by suggesting that animal and human share a common ancestry. However, his non-religious biology appealed to the rising class of professional scientists, and by the time of his death, evolutionary imagery had spread through all of science, literature, and politics. Darwin, himself an agnostic, was accorded the ultimate British accolade of burial in Westminster Abbey, London. Darwin formulated his bold theory in private in 1837 to 1839, returning from a voyage around the world about M.H.S. Beagle. But it was not until 2 decades later that he finally gave its full public expression in The Origin of Species, 1859, a book that has deeply influenced modern Western society and thought. Darwin embarked on the Beagle voyage on December 27, 1831. The circumnavigation of the global world could be the making of Darwin. 5 years of physical hardship and mental rigor, imprisoned within a ship's wall, offset by wide open opportunities in the Brazilian jungle and the Andes mountains, were to give Darwin a new seriousness. As a gentleman naturalist, he could leave the ship for intense periods, pursuing his own interests. As a result, he spent only 18 months of the voyage aboard the ship. Among the places Darwin visited on the voyage were the Cape Verde Islands, coastal regions of Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina, and the Galapagos Islands. On the last leg of the voyage, Darwin finished his 770-page diary, wrapped up to 1,750 pages of notes, drew into up to 12 catalogues of his 5,436 skins, bones, and carcasses, and still he wondered was which Galapagos mockingbird, a naturally produced variety. Why did ground sloth become extinct? He sailed home with problems enough to last him a lifetime. Following the voyage, Darwin became well known through his diary publication as Journal of Research into Geology and Natural History of the various countries visited by HMS Beagle, 1839. He also employed the best experts that published their descriptions of his specimens in his Zoology of the Voyage of HMS Beagle, 1838 to 1843. Darwin drafted a 35-page sketch of his theory of natural selection in 1842 and expanded it in 1844. But he had no immediate intention of publishing it. In 1842, Darwin, increasingly shunning society, had moved his family to isolated village of Down in Kent at the extreme edge of the world. It was only 16 miles 26 kilometers from central London. From 1846 to 1854, Darwin added to his credibility as an expert on species by pursuing a detailed study of all known barnacles, interviewed by their sexual differentiations. He discovered that some females had tiny, degenerate males clinging to them. This sparked his interest in the evolution of the diverging male and female form from an original hermaphrodite creature. 4 monographs on such an obscure group made him a world expert. No longer could he be dismissed as a spectacular on biology matter. In the 1850s, the changing social composition of science in England, typified by the rise of the free-thinking biologist Thomas Henry Huxley, promised that Darwin's world would be well received. Huxley, the philosopher Herbert Spencer, and other outriders were opting for secular nature in the rationalist Westminster Review and deriding the influence of Parsondom, the influence of the church. Darwin had himself lost share on his belief in Christianity with the tragic death of his oldest daughter, Annie, from typhoid in 1851. In 1854, Darwin solved his major problem, the forking for genera to produce a new evolutionary branches. He used an industrial analogy familiar from the Wedgwood factories. The division of labor competition in nature's overcrowded marketplace would favor variants that could exploit different aspect ratio of a niche. Species could diverge on the spot like tradesmen in the same tenement. In 1856, Darwin began writing a triple volume book, tentatively called Natural Selection, whereas in the 1830s, Darwin had thought that species remained perfectly adapted until the environment changed. He now believed that every new variation was imperfect and that perpetual struggle was the rule. He also explained the evolutionary of sterile worker bees in 1857. These could not be selected because they did not breed, so he opted for family selection, kin selection as it is known as today. The whole colony benefited from this retention. Darwin had finished 250,000 words by the June 18, 1858. That day he received a letter from Alfred Russel Vance, an English socialist and specimen collector working in a Malay archipelago sketching a similar looking theory. Darwin, fearing loss of pituitary, accepted a solution proposed by geologist Sir Charles Darwin and botanist Joseph Dalton Hooker. Joint extract from Darwin and Wallace's work could be read at the Lenin Society on the July 1, 1858. Darwin was away sick, grieving for his tiny son who died in the scarlet fever, and thus he missed the first public presentation of the theory of the natural selection. Darwin hastily began an abstract of natural selection, which grew into a more accessible book on the origin of species by means of the natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Suffering from a terrible bout of nausea, Darwin, now 50, was secreted away at a spa on the desolate Yorkshire moors when the book was sold to the trade on November 22, 1859. He still feared the worst. The book did distract his Cambian patron, but they were marginal to science now. However, radical distracted were sympathetic, as the rising London biologist and geologist, even if few actually adopted Darwin cost-benefit approach to nature. The newspapers drew the one conclusion that Darwin had specifically avoided: the human had evolved from apes, and that Darwin was denying mankind immunities. A sensitive Darwin, making no personal appearance, let Huxley, by now a good friend, manage this part of debate. The treadmill of experiment and the writing gave much meaning to Darwin's life, but as he wrapped up his final long-term interest publishing the formation of vegetable mound, thought the action of worms. 1881. The future looked bleak. Such as earthy subject was typical Darwin, just as he had shown that today ecosystems were built by infinitesimal degree and the mighty Andes by tiny uplift. So he ended on the monumental transformation of landscape by the earth's humblest denizen.